Hi, and welcome to another reading. Today we're going to read some stories that are with the characters from the Time Is series, but not from the Time Is books. So these are some additional ones that I wrote and placed in, there you go, placed in another glimpse of my shorts, another collection of short stories. So what we're going to do is we're going to read about Wolf and Francis this time, and it's called A Legend is Born. Wolf and Francis were going over the Gristmill Village cleanup and repair list with Lon. With Lon in place to run things, they were taking one of their all too infrequent vacations, and he would oversee the contractors coming in. At the end, he would throw the customary party for the workers. He'd done it already a few times so successfully that they were confident in his ability to do it again. They were free to enjoy themselves with a clear conscience. They had time to spend and realized that with all the planning for the village, they hadn't planned for their rest and recreation time. Let's go to the lab and find some place to go. It doesn't have to be some when, you know. Approaching the lab, they stopped at the mailbox. Since it had to accommodate several families, it was a 10-spot lockbox. Wolf pulled on the keys on his belt and felt the chain zip forward as he unlocked number 3 and withdrew their mail. Sorting through it, he handed Francis several letters, including a large official-looking envelope. In the lab, they grabbed drinks and sat down to sort through the mail. Francis eagerly tore open the large envelope and poured out a stack of papers. Wolf looked up from a letter and saw the eager look on Francis's face. "What's that you're so excited to get?" Francis looked up from her perusal of the lead page. "It's one of those DNA things. It tells how much your percentage of what you are." Wolf had long known Francis's curiosity about her heritage. She was orphaned so young that she had no knowledge of her parentage. This had bothered her quite a bit. Oddly, though, she would not make use of the time machine at their disposal to do the research. He had often pointed out that 5 minutes would suffice to show her parents and her family. For some reason, she never seemed to want to go that route. She scanned the document. Excuse me. Sorry. She scanned the document through all the advertising verbiage for more detailed reports and found the section she wanted. It says here I'm 45 Guarani, 35% Spanish, and 15% Navajo, 10% Argentine. Wolf looked up Guarani and turned the screen to Francis. "Seems some of your ancestors were from the Amazon rainforest." Francis stood and went into the dressing room. There she looked closely at herself in the mirror. Wolf came up behind her as she tried to see which branch she favored. "What do you see?" he inquired of her reflection. "I don't know, I guess. Looks-wise, I pretty much am a blend. I think the mix gave you not only your beauty, but your strength, too. You really are a Wonder Woman." Francis playfully reached back, bringing his head closer, and kissed his cheek. "Why don't we take a trip to the Amazon? I saw that the area you're linked to is somewhere around the lower middle." He logged onto a travel agent, and when Francis tapped to return, "This is a lot faster. We can book a hotel today and maybe a tour. Then, if we want, we can fly back whenever we're ready. In the meantime, we can maybe wander around. If we need it, we can ask someone to be on standby for when we do go for a walk." They went to pack and change. Coming out of the cabin, Wolf was ready for adventure in khaki, and Francis ready to be comfortable in a long brown silk skirt and tank top. With a small duffel each, they went to the lab, and after informing Don of their departure, and that since they were going in present time, an angel was not immediately needed. Just in case, though, could he find someone to place on standby? Don offered himself as things were slow and wished them a fun trip. Francis made lodging arrangements while Wolf went through the filing cabinet and collected their passports. "Can we stay in luxury tents for a few nights?" Francis called. "Sure, darling, let's spoil ourselves a little bit." Wolf put their passports in their bags, checked they had enough cash on hand, and loaded in their coordinates onto Fred. Francis did a scan about half a mile from the site and was ready to push the access when she made a change and had them pop in near a bus station. The area they were headed to was remote, and the area surrounding it was full of cities. They could catch the bus and meet fellow travelers on the way. Frances had Wilf walk through first. She had him enter through a handicapped toilet as the most private area she could, then did the same for herself. Once outside, they found the bus station and bought tickets. Sitting on benches, they looked around. Frances peered at the time board. They had an hour before the bus would arrive. She grasped Wilf by the arm and led him to a nearby grocery store for a few provisions. Wilf almost cleaned them out of the hot empanadas, and Frances topped up with mebiju, a cheesy flatbread. They enjoyed talking with a few of the locals. Luckily, they had learned Spanish earlier for a different trip. The main subject under discussion was Lake Ipacari, which was fast becoming unbearable thanks to the influx of tourists, boaters and bikers, and even some daring souls who tried snorkeling in the shallow waters. Mrs. Ayala was quite vocal on the subject and wished all tourists would go to hell. When it was pointed out that her own position at the campground would be lost were they to do so, she replied that it might almost be worth it. Mrs. Ayala asked Frances and Wilf whereabouts they lived, as she hadn't seen them before. Frances bluffed, and Wilf coughed. I'm sorry to say, but we're tourists too. But I do understand how you feel. It's terrible when people don't respect and appreciate a place enough to protect it. Frances agreed. That's the trouble with tourists. They don't live here, so they don't care. She looked carefully at Frances. Your people must have lived here a long time ago. You have the look of the place in your eyes and face. She turned to Wilf, who had sat down on the bench and was munching another empanada. You look more like the Spaniards who came here long ago. Her eyes softened a little as she saw the way Wilf was looking at Frances. She turned her gaze on Frances again. This one appreciates you. He's worth keeping. Frances giggled and grasped Wilf's hand. Come on, we better get to the bus stop before we miss it. Mrs. Ayala stopped them before they had gotten 2 steps. Don't bother that smelly old bus. My car's outside. I'll take you up with me. I'm the manager, so I'll see you're all right. Excuse me. This time it's coffee, so it's not helping. I need tea again. Outside, she led the way to a bright red Toyota Hilux and waved them inside. Frances and Wilf both tried to gain shotgun first. After a brief wrestling match, Frances dove in, leaving Wilf to clamber onto the back. There wasn't much room in the back seat, as boxes and bags on the seat and floor. Wilf and Frances introduced themselves, and Miss Ayala welcomed them cordially. Sorry about what I said about tourists back there. You're all right, because at least you've learned Spanish very well. Most people never even try to learn the language when they visit. They just expect everyone speaks English. Who spoke up from the back? Spanish, though, is the most commonly used language in the world. It used to be. Now English is. I think Spanish now comes second. Frances objected on the way to the campsite. They marveled at how civilized everything was. Frances was a little disappointed. I thought it'd be more primitive, more jungle-like. The jungle area gets smaller every year. We're trying to push to keep what little is left. The longer it takes, the more we lose until there won't be anything to say but the memories. The ride was over in half an hour, and they were ushered into a cabin to register. They chose a cabin on stilts that would overlook the whole area. Up in the cabin, they unpacked and sat out on the porch for a while to see what they could. Wilf leaned on the railing, taking in the hammocks below, the fire pits, the open areas to eat and congregate. Turning his back to the railing, he looked inside their accommodations for the week. Clean and bright, though sparse in furnishings, it was a comfortable place to sleep and relax after a day's exploration. He sat beside Frances, who was drumming her fingers on the arm of the chair. Her eyes were distant. When she came back from wherever her mind was, she tapped on her return. Don, are you near the lab? Don's voice came sleepily over this earpiece. No, but give me a sec and I will be. Is everything all right? Yes, I just wanted to see if there was anywhere near us that was a little more primitive, more like a jungle. There was a pause as the sound of Don stretching and yawning. He made his way to the lab, and the sounds from his return played over hers. Dot didn't always remember to double tap the communications link, and it led to some very interesting audio. Okay, I have you fixed. Let me look around. There was a sound of humming as he tried to find a suitable place for them. I think I have what you want on the backside of the lake. There's another smaller lake, plenty of trees and rivers, as well as a high hill that looks out over everything, plus not a sign of civilization nearby. Frances grinned. Sounds perfect. She checked around and made sure they weren't visible from inside and outside. Can you patch us through to there? Don did a visual check on the area they were in for visibility and then opened the portal. Walking through, they were greeted by a lush, verdant sight that made them pause as they emerged. Thanks, Don. This is perfect, Frances exclaimed breathlessly. Far behind them was the large expanse of water of the Ipikiri Lake. The sour smell of it reached them on the gust of wind. Climbing the hill, they got a better view of the surrounding area. Wilf was looking to the right and thought this might be a good area to explore. They ran down the hill and crossed the stream on rocks. Taking a turn to the left, they approached the river. Though swift moving, it was traversable with care. Frances's skirt became a hindrance as the water rushed into it and slowed her down. Wilf picked her up and carried her across. Hopping from one small island to another, they made their way to the other side. Here there was a small crater lake that Wilf promptly dove into. From below, he called for Frances to join him. Tying off her skirt, she dove swift and graceful as an eagle. For a while they enjoyed the cool water, swimming and splashing each other. They climbed out using rocks and roots projecting from the walls and began a winding track inwards. In the trees, toucans called on the ground. Capybaras greeted them with a welcoming smile. A peccary grunted as it dug roots and ate his meal. This was what they had come for. They came to a plot area that looked as if it had once been inhabited. Root plants were in abundance and beans grew on stalks. At the fringe of the plot were evidence that burning had been done to clear the land at one time. Several remains of grass and stick dwellings were found, spaced out, and destroyed to almost ground level. Animals dwelt in the field where once the native population had farmed and lived. Evidence of fish bones gave more information of the people who had once lived there. Wilf was wandering around poking at pals with a stick while Frances dug up some sweet potatoes and started a fire. Once the fire was reduced to glowing coals, she wrapped the potatoes in leaves and covered them with heat. Gathering her skirt around her, she sat away from the heat of the fire under the cooling shade of a tree. She closed her eyes, trying to picture the people who lived and worked in this village. Waking from her musings, she passed through to Don. Don, sorry to bother you, but can you find out when this area was free from European influence and when the Guarani were using the site? You heard Don's chuckle. Already on it, Frances. I figured you'd want to see them in situ. I can patch you there whenever you're ready. Wilf, she called, as Wilf wasn't in sight. A poke in her sides made her whip around ready to fight, but she was caught in Wilf's arms and they were kissing. You two let me know when you're finished, okay? They separated reluctantly and Wilf got on his return. We're ready, Don. Where are you placing us? Don gave them direction to a natural blind that was present in both times. He said he had a new way of transitioning he wanted to try, and this was as good a time and place as any. They crouched low and waited. Don and the lad linked them with their returns and projected the portal like a bubble over them. From their position, they could see the village clearly. Don, we have to be visible even though the blind is fairly dense. Can we move to a better location? Don was clapping in his excitement. You can't be seen because you aren't there. You're in a time bubble and still in our time while everything you see is in the past. This way, as long as you stay together, you can move around. I'm working on making the bubble larger, but we're still in the experimental stage. To them, it may seem as if there's a little distortion in your locality, but you both are in two separate times. If you want to transition to that time, let me know and I'll pop the bubble. Donald and I thought this up recently for times when things and periods are dangerous. In front of them was a field with women tending it. Some had their babies strapped to their backs. To the rear were huts that were built of sticks and grass woven into them. A few peccaries were wandering around eating sweet potatoes. A couple of small children were using dried grass and corn husks and wrapping themselves a dowel. This would be added to the family they were creating. A young boy was busy making himself a spear for fishing. He had sharpened the front to a point and with a backwards barb for retaining the fish he had caught. The children talked and laughed. While unable to understand their language, they did understand the sentiment of their conversation. They were cheerful and apparently joking about something. The men returned from a fishing expedition with a large selection. A long fire trough was built and loaded with wood. In a small earthen fireplace, the fire was kept continually going. A branch was lit and the wood in the trough set ablaze. Once reduced to coals, the fish were wrapped in leaves and laid on. Corn was added. It was time to wait. One of the men assisted the youngster with his fishing pole by adding a braided set of vines and tying it to the spear. He demonstrated how it could be thrown and retrieved, much to the boys' delight. They went to the river to test it. Don's voice rumbled in their ears. I'm one wide angle looking down, and I'm sure I see someone slinking furtively into the area. I'm going to pull back in case this is a surveyor with more people behind him. Don, where is the person you saw approaching from? The river. He's headed towards the father and son, testing out the poles. Patch us through to where they are, Wolf requested. A quick overlay and they were in position, and their position changed to the new location. Overhead, Don watched as the intruder approached from the rear. The father and son were oblivious to anything but their fishing. They had already caught a few fish and were sitting on the bank waiting for another to swim into view. Don let Wolf and Francis know where the vanguard was approaching from. The rest of the invaders were now approaching the village from the left-hand side. Wolf looked up and saw a large branch above them. Don, put us up on the branch and then pop the bubble. Wolf gathered some pebbles and waited. Another overlay and they were on this branch. They lay down and watched the single invader approach soundlessly. Wolf took a pebble and threw it at the father so that it hit his left side. The man spun around and caught sight of the intruder. With a sharp snap of his arm and the spear slid in his hand. In one smooth motion, he let the spear fly, impaling the intruder as he rose to attack. The cry let loose from the dying man sent the other invaders into a frenzied attack. Don replaced the bubble and transported them back to the village. From their blind, they watched as the villagers readied for the attack. Men grabbed spears and stood in line waiting. Two women gathered the youngest children to a hut with one of the men who brought in an armful of spears. They stood at the doorway in readiness. The air echoed with the chilling cry of the invaders. As they approached at a run, they let fly a volley of spears. At the first volley, the villagers ran forward, dropping low and throwing a return barrage. By running forward, they reinvaded the first throw, and by aiming low, they hit up marks when the invaders dropped to their knees. The defenders swung on the other spear from the side in rapid succession, aiming higher as the invaders rose to attack once more. Out of the 60 or so defenders, 2 were wounded. Of the invaders, they were left with only 15 who were able to retreat unassisted. Over 30 were severely wounded and assisted each other to retreat, and another 15 that were so wounded to move about, and about 25 dead. The ones who survived were brought into one of the large huts, and what became of them, none of the guild cared to find out. Francis and Wolf returned to the river. Over their heads was a large tree with the vines descending. Wolf asked Don to remove the bubble. The river was clean and clear, so that it was an inviting place to swim. Francis gathered some acai berries and was sitting hip deep in the flowing water, her skirt billowing with the tide. As she ate the ripe fruit, the juice dripped from her lips. Wolf climbed with youthful energy up the trunk and grabbed a handful of vines. He backed up and swung in a wide arc, letting go over a deep pool. Francis applauded his marksmanship as he rushed back to do it again. This time, his aim was off and he landed on a small bank that protruded into the river. He landed with a thud that knocked the wind out of him. Francis dove in and swam swiftly to the other side. Unfortunately, Dunn was in the bathroom and not exactly in a position to put a blind in front of them. Francis's yell and cry were heard over a long distance, and the villagers ran to see what was shrieking. When they arrived at the river's edge, the sight in front of them gave them shivers. Seated on the edge of the bank was a beautiful woman whose hair was streaked with water foliage. Her lips, stained at the sides and red, were slowly dripping onto the bank. Her legs were fused together so that she looked as if she had a long, flowing tail, which splayed at the end to form fins. She was leaning over the sprawling form of a male who was lying as if asleep or dead. The villagers stood staring at this tableau for a moment. Francis shrieked at them to get out. While they couldn't understand the words, the look on her face and the sound she emitted left no doubt in their minds they were not wanted. They rushed back to the village. Don finally finished and brought them home using the bubble. Wolf was just coming round as Francis applied cold compresses to his head and neck. He wondered why they were at the lab instead of Paraguay. Explanation swiftly put him in the picture. A thought suddenly dawned on Don, and he brought out 2 reference books. A comparison of them showed that the Guarani people had gained a new tale in their mythology. Listen to this. There's a myth about a beautiful mermaid that lives in Tepico Lake called the Lara. She is said to lure lovers who will do anything to be with her, and she either sucks their blood or takes care of them until they die. Either way, she is eternally lonely. Her cry is heard in the night, and she draws men to where she lays and wait for them. Wolf and Francis looked over Don's shoulder and compared the 2 reference books. Looks like you're famous now, Francis. Come on, let's head back. We still have some sightseeing to do. So that's the first of several of the stories. The rest are all as they are on Glimpse of My Shorts on mysteries. There's some humor ones in here. There's some little bit of everything. And hope to have you come back and we'll read some more. Not sure what we'll do for the next short. Possibly do something from the end of the book, maybe a little surprise. We'll see what we got. I'll think about it. If you have any suggestions or anything that you'd like to hear, or if you have written a book and would like me to review it online and do a video with that, that would be fantastic. I'd love to do it. So always looking for new things to read. Thank you for visiting, and I hope to see you next time. Just remember, all my books are available on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, and Smashwords. The Smashwords books, Time Is, and a new one I just recently put out there called Murder in Mildenhall, which contains about 5 short Harry Prentice stories. He's a person who was in services, came in as a cook, and moved over to OSI. In fact, I think I'll read one of those next time. And there's several shorts. The first book is free. You can download it. You are welcome to pay whatever fee you want. The rest of the books are, Time Is also free. The rest of them are between $2 and $3. So they're all ebook on Smashwords. Please take a look. You can go onto my blog and take a look there at timeiswaswillbe.wordpress.com, and it has links to all my books on both sites, or all 3 sites. So please join me, and hope to see you again next time. Thank you for visiting.